Good afternoon, everyone. Such a pleasure to have you on this Thursday afternoon. We are doing the event the webinar a little bit early today, this week, because tomorrow is July 4th, and we know a lot of people go on vacation, and it's such a nice weather. I mean, why wouldn't you want to go on a vacation? Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to be discussing today in our webinar. Today's webinar is going to be about not-for-profit corporations and bylaws. What we're going to explore is how to create bylaws and what bylaws should consist of and what type of not-for-profit organizations exist. Today is a very exciting topic. I think that a lot of people want to know more about not-for-profit corporations and bylaws and how to make sure that the organization is actually effective and runs smoothly. These are all important questions that people ask when they're creating a not-for-profit organization. And what a not-for-profit organization is. It's different from charities, so it is not the same as charity. It can incorporate some charitable concepts, but it's not this. The not-for-profit organization is completely different. So first, let me discuss about myself. Who am I? I am a lawyer who practices in business law, civil litigation, and criminal law. I have worked in several areas of the legal field and have years of legal experience working with various organizations like the Ministry of Attorney General, as well as lawyers and other individuals. I have worked with various areas of law, including civil litigation, family law, criminal law, and other matters like divisional appeal court matters, and as well as worked with several different individuals, including lawyers, justices, and legal staff, as well as the public. So I have years of customer service experience. If you want to know more about me, you can read up on my bio on my website, which is listed below for your reference. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me. I will respond accordingly, and we can book an appointment in if you need to ask any legal questions. Now let's go to today's topic. So what is a not-for-profit organization? Consider what a not-for-profit organization is. It is an organization. Obviously, you're not asking for profit. That is why we call it a not-for-profit organization. And it is formed to be either a corporation or a not corporation. You do not have to incorporate, but there are really important factors to consider when you are dealing with a not-for-profit organization. They are not formed for profit generation. So remember that you are not expecting to get any funding, any investments, or as well as you're not trying to create a revenue stream by creating a not-for-profit organization. These organizations are founded by individuals, and usually they're called members. Members are individuals who are part of the not-for-profit organization and have collaborated in the purpose of creating this community, social, cultural organization. The not-for-profit organization actually assists many different types of groups of individuals, as indicated here, serve social, cultural, and community purposes. They obtain funds through fundraisers, government grants, memberships, and donation. They can also be federally or provincially incorporated. However, they are not required to be incorporated. So we will discuss this a little bit more detail in further slides. Now let's discuss what is a not-for-profit my apologies, not-for-profit, the difference between not-for-profit and a for-profit organization. So the purposes, it's mission driven for a not-for-profit organization. You are not required to have any revenue streams. And for a profit organization, it is usually a revenue stream requirement. So basically, you're either asking for investments or you're looking for actual specific services provided to be able to obtain any funding for those services or fees for those services, or other types of corporations that create a revenue based on the sales of products or other aspects of corporate practices. However, for a not-for-profit corporation, most of the time you will be either raising a fundraiser for the funds that you need for specific purposes, or like donations, or you're helping a organization, or you're trying to create a scholarship fund. These are all things that a for-profit organization can do. It can also create a not-for-profit organization can do. A not-for-profit organization has different types of purposes. These are not limited to just raising funds for scholarship kids or individuals with disability, or a health purpose, like if you're trying to support cancer foundations. All of these aspects are included in the not-for-profit organization. However, there are other types of not-for-profit organizations like social clubs. If you're in a soccer club, you want to create a not-for-profit social club. You can be in a not-for-profit organization that just has cultural events like Caribbean Club or a Sri Lankan club, or just to have a club that will allow you to have a membership into, and you could create events and other purposes. The purpose of the club can be anything. It can be a range of just saw events where you have activities, or you can be raising funds to assist in individuals with poverty or food drives. You could also be able to just have an event for your own organization. So you're not limited in this aspect. Whereas governance in these not-for-profit organizations is based on volunteers. The not-for-profit organization has members, volunteer members. So individuals can pay a fee to become a member, or they can have a sign-up sheet. It depends on the type of organization that you create and the type of bylaws you install into the organization. So remember that you want to be able to create a foundation from the start, making sure that you have specific guidelines. So remember all of these factors, because we're going to discuss it in more detail in further slides. What else? Ownership. So there is no ownership when it comes to a not-for-profit organization. Members are usually paying a fee to be a member, so they own sort of the organization, but they are not actual owners. The organization itself runs on its own merit, because the members may pass away or may decide to leave the organization, and when they do, those organizations will continue to run and operate on itself. Whereas a private corporation, depending on the people who have the shares in that corporation, and if they, like, how do I explain this? If they decide that they no longer want to be in the organization, they can sell their shares. But if they're the only shareholder in that organization, then now you have a problem where you have no choice but to dissolve the corporation at the end of the day in order to get rid of the shares. However, a not-for-profit organization can continue for years or generations without, as long as it has a few members or a particular amount of members in the organization. If it doesn't, it can get dissolved. It usually can be dissolved either by the directors who are elected into the board of directors, whichever one you would prefer to call the not-for-profit organization's board. They will decide whether or not it gets dissolved, or they can, if nobody is available and everybody has stopped the membership and the organization is no longer functional, the government can eventually, if it's incorporated, the government can actually dissolve the organization, the business registry, sorry. They can dissolve the organization based on the fact that no filing has been completed. So if it's a not-for-profit organization that is not incorporated, then it dissolves on its own if there is no further members. So these are all different options. Now let's go to the next slide. Why incorporate a not-for-profit corporation? This is important because a not-for-profit corporation can function without having incorporated, as long as it has members who are willing to continue the organization. However, when you incorporate, there is a specific set of guidance that you are required to follow. And as well as it actually allows you to be able to request, once you're incorporated, you're able to set up specific requirements like tax benefits, and you can also ask for government grants and licensing capacity. So if you're if you're in a specific municipality and you need to have a not-for-profit where the building is required for specific activities, let's say you're a soccer or a baseball or a basketball social club. Now you're a not-for-profit club, but you're a social club as well. And these clubs need a place where they can do their activities. Like, let's say you want to play soccer and you need the activity. You can either create a building and where the soccer field is, and you could actually continue that activity, but you will have to register with the municipality in that instance. And in order to do that, you need to be incorporated. You also may need insurance purposes. This will allow you to also have insurance if you incorporate. These are all aspects of a not-for-profit organization that are beneficial when it's incorporated, because without incorporation, the insurance policies that cover the organization is more difficult. The requirement to obtain any municipal licensing to do the activities that you need to do, even if it's fundraising or it is a specific type of activity just for the fun of it, then you might need to make sure that you have the access to a building or access to a particular site, which requires municipal application for licensing or a specific type of requirement. So all of these aspects need to be considered when you're dealing with incorporation, as well as it also enables contracts and property ownership. So the not-for-profit corporation can own the property as well. So it can purchase it out of the fundraiser or out of the membership donations, which is permitted. That will allow you to protect the organization and the property itself so that no one else is able to take advantage of the organization's benefits for themselves. Okay, so now that we've talked about why you need to incorporate a not-for-profit, let's talk about where you can incorporate a not-for-profit organization. It is important to know that you can incorporate both provincially and federally. However, if you consider provincially, you're limited to one province. So that means you may be required to complete your incorporation with filing your articles of incorporation within one location. Just make sure that when you are doing that, you want to be able to put in the correct purposes, because it may be restricted in specific ways in the provincial legislation, whereas comparatively to the federal. So these are all things to consider. Consider future expansion and fundraising needs. So do you need to incorporate to be able to grow the not-for-profit, or are you limiting that not-for-profit just to one area? Like, if you have an international organization, you might want to make sure that it's incorporated on a Canada-wide level so that you can actually incorporate in other jurisdictions and other countries as well, rather than just having it limited to a provincial corporation. So this is an aspect to consider, very important, as well as putting it into the bylaws, specific regulatory things that the organization may need to be implementing in order to create those bylaws, depending on the core incorporation and the level of incorporation. Articles should have specific type of purpose. What is the purpose? The purpose of a not-for-profit organization is the type of activity that not-for-profit organization will be conducting throughout the process. So even if you put a commercial purpose, if any included into the purpose, make sure that you limit that commercial for only support and advance purposes, rather than it being for an actual commercial revenue purpose, because a not-for-profit organization cannot be creating a revenue. And if there is revenue, then you're going to be taxed at a higher portion than a regular, and it may have regulatory requirements under the CRA, which you will have to review with an accountant. So these are all things that you need to consider when you're doing the not-for-profit organization. Okay, so now let's talk about bylaws. What are bylaws? Bylaws are important because they actually create a structure for the organization. So in many bylaws, you can include the type of purpose the organization has, the organization's name, the membership information, what type of governance it has, meetings that may be conducted by the parties or the members in order to, let's say, if they're required to have annual, monthly, weekly meetings, what type of roles each individual who's elected into the board of directors or the board of membership is playing, and what kind of decision making they have. So if each members, let's say you have a president you've created a role of a president into the bylaws. What role does this president have? What decision-making capacity do they have? Where and when can they actually implement things without bringing it first to the board of members or board of directors? So what are their actual responsibilities? And it also provides the process of electing directors and officers. This is important because this is what actually allows the members to be able to vote and how they can vote. What type of quorum is required? I mean, if it's 2/3 majority, and that is the amount of people are required to vote for the president to be elected in, then that's the quorum that you need to be able to establish when you're doing the electoral process. So this can be legally binding based on the all the members agreeing to the standards of following this bylaw. So remember those aspects as well. It also provides the duties and powers of each member who was elected as a board of directors. So you want to make sure you put in all of these information, as well as how to amend the process of amending the bylaws or the procedures, so that you know for future how to create or how to amend or incorporate specific specific regulatory requirements within the bylaws. So think about all these aspects, because these are important in the long run for you to be able to function as a not-for-profit and be able to continue the not-for-profit in a way that will be effective and will allow you to continue without having any further incidences, including conflicts. You want to make sure there's any kind of conflict resolution. You can put that in the bylaw too, how to resolve conflicts or conflict resolution between members, decisions, or board of member decisions or board of director decisions, and the members, what their choices are if they want to oppose that decision and how to implement that as well. So these are all things that can be considered into the bylaw because they're essential for how the organization is run and who has the ability to make decisions and what roles they play. When are bylaws required? Bylaws are usually required right after incorporation. Sometimes you don't really, if you are a very small organization, you may not really require the bylaws at the time and stage when you create the organization. However, as you expand or as you need to grow and you want to have more members into your organization, these are things to consider as essential parts of the incorporation process, but as well as essential parts of the organization's growth process. So consider what stage or what type of organization you have and how big of a scale of the organization you want to build. These are important factors to consider when you're incorporating. Must comply with the ONCA or Federal NFP Act. So remember that the bylaws cannot overturn the statutes. The statutes are mandatory and are required and are there for a particular purpose, whereas bylaws are created for internal processes and are only there to assist in the regulation and conflict issues, and as well as creating board of directors who are able to actually implement any of the required membership votings or any kind of special committees or creating special club meetings or annual meetings. These are all things that are considered important, and as well as how to elect all the board members and what are the annual fees or any other types of benefits that might be available to the members. So consider all of these when creating a bylaw, because bylaws are not going to overturn the regulatory process, but they will allow you to implement them in a more effective way within your organization, which is meant to grow, and you want to be able to have more members in the long run, or you want to be able to create a not-for-profit that lasts past the decade or 2 decades. In order to do that, you need to implement proper bylaws. Essentially, they also allow for dispute resolution and compliance. So these are important factors to be able to consider in creating bylaws. They will assist you in long-term goals. Now let's talk about what bylaws should include. This is important because your organization will have members, and each member may have a different opinion. In order to be able to make sure that the bylaws are allowing you to continue the organization, you will need membership rules and rights. So who has the voting right? You could have memberships that don't have voting rights. You could have a limited type of memberships where you're restricting the membership based on invitation only. It's organizations like specific not-for-profit organizations that are like International Lions Club or other organizations like Red Cross or certain organizations like these have a huge amount of population or members, and you want to be able to say, hey, I don't want all my members to be able to make decisions, and I don't want to have any conflicts between these board of directors and the members, including if you have procedural issues or if you have financial concerns. These are all issues that arise throughout the process of having an organization that's a not-for-profit organization, especially financial concerns, if members are in the board of directors and what capacity they have to be able to use financial means to assist in expanding the organization or creating fundraising or activities and social events. These are all things that are important because you want to be able to keep track of all these aspects. So it's always also contact and speak to an accountant to make sure that you're actually following the guidelines required for a CRA, as well as you need to be able to make sure that the fundraising is actually being creating a system where nobody can just take money out of the accounts without properly being vetted or properly being providing receipts. So these become issues, and bylaws will allow you to create a structure where you can elect accountants or even say, okay, we want to hire an accountant. So how do we do this? And this is where the board of directors will be dealing with the financial aspects, and they will be reviewing the finances to be able to say, here, we're hiring this accountant to be able to review all the accounts and be able to give us funding as needed and necessary, and be able to keep track of receipts. These are all important things, but conflict does arise, and we need to be able to have a system in place to be able to create a dispute resolution procedure. This is where bylaws are implemented and important, as well as creating the electoral process. So think about when you're dealing with a bylaw, what matters to you? What is it that is essential for the organization? Do you need to make sure that there is a conflict resolution? Do you need to make sure that there is an electoral process to be able to elect the board of directors, the vice president, the president, the secretary, the treasurer? These are all individuals that that can be implemented into the bylaws, and how they are elected, or what type of memberships are permitted, and who can become a member of the organization. These are also important aspects of why the bylaw exists. So, board of directors and their legal duties. This is important. As a not-for-profit organization, and you are elected as a member of the board of directors, you will have a lot of requirements that are as per the Act. And in this instance, the board of directors must act in the best interest of the not-for-profit organization. They have the special responsibility because they are the directors who are responsible for decision making. They are the individuals taking on the financial responsibilities. So they are responsible for financial obligations and management, including any account information that's being funded or funding other things, activities, and any kind of organized events that the board is creating. They have to account for all the funding, especially to their members. This is important because there are major amount of fundings that can come in. Like, you have organizations, I'm a part of several of these organizations, and they have memberships such as Criminal Lawyers Association or the Ontario Bar Association. These are all membership organizations. They require specific regulatory processes, as well as directors who are able to be elected into the place of directors, and then they actually make decision. They have to follow the bylaws and applicable laws. They also have the ability to implement change into the bylaws by a specific method. If a member comes up and says we need to amend the bylaws, and they can create a voting system, create the amended bylaw, and presented in front of the board of directors as well as the members and indicate how to vote them into existence, or they can be voted out. So it depends on the circumstances what you decide to do. So consider all of these aspects. They also review document and they make decisions on these documents. So consider these aspects very carefully. If you are a member of the directors, member of the board of directors, you need to use care, diligence, and skill in making decisions. So if you have no idea how to do the financial management, hire an accountant or get advice from an accountant. These are all aspects that are important. Always look at expertise from external view if you do not have that knowledge in yourself. So if you need a legal advisor, hire a lawyer. These are all important aspects that need to be considered as a director on the board. So it is important for you to make sure that you're implementing these legislative requirements, and as well as your ability to make proper decisions in your role. So what's the difference between members and the board of directors? Members are indicated by application process. Once they are accepted, can request to be nominated as a director or officer in the board of directors. However, directors manage operation and strategy. They must be elected in the position. Roles must be clearly defined in the bylaws. Remember that in the bylaws, it could say that if you wanted to become a director on the board of director, it could be implemented that there needs to be a requirement. The requirement can be you have 3 years of membership with this organization and you have an understanding of a specific role that is applicable to the board of directors. These are all important because depending on what type of director or what type of organization you are in, you might want to make sure that that director has the knowledge and expertise to be able to implement decisions in appropriate ways and manner, as well as following the regulatory process and the statutes or laws that are in effect at this time. We don't want directors to just make any kind of decision. This is why you could also implement another system within the bylaws, creating a checks and balance system where you have a director and a vice president who, if there is a board of directors and there's 3 or 4 people elected to that board of directors, you get a quorum from that board of directors to make a decision that can change the outcome of specific considerations, especially like financial decisions or other kind of important decisions, like the direction which the non-for-profit organization is going into. So depending on this type of decision you're making, directors are able to make decisions, but they still have to follow the bylaws. Members are usually either they're either by the process of application, or a member who's already in existence in the not-for-profit organization can actually allow the person to invite the person to become a member of that organization. So there's different ways to become members, and you can actually put in a specific clause within your bylaws indicating that members are only allowed to be permitted into membership of this organization by another individual who's already a member, who has indicated that this person has been invited. So this is a process, and I know it seems complicated, and we are here as I am here as a lawyer to be able to assist in these kind of processes. So if you have questions, if you need assistance to go forth in creating these not-for-profit organizations, or you have a litigious issue that comes up because of the not-for-profits encounter with another individual who is suing them, these are all things that you can contact a lawyer, contact me, and ask for a meeting so we can discuss this further. So don't hesitate. If you have concerns, you can book an appointment with me and we will discuss this in further detail. Okay? So let's go to our next topic. Writing effective bylaws. So remember that I have been discussing this throughout the webinar. This is important because in order to be able to understand, in order to be able to have members who understand the bylaws, you want to be able to be consistent in your language and plain, be clear, be precise. We do not want these organizations are going to be with members who are not lawyers. But you want to make sure that you have implemented specific systems that will allow you to continue the organization, and as well as you have to include include bylaws that are appropriate for the organization. So in dealing with these kind of issues, it's important to be able to look at the organization's purpose first, because the Articles of Incorporation already instill a specific type of purpose that your organization will be following. So if it's a social organization built for the purpose of having social events and just being able to have a organization where you can go gather and have activities, have fun, and deal with, then you have a specific purpose. If you have a purpose of also creating a organization that creates fundraising and assists individuals in medical health practice, then you have a different type of purpose. And each of these purposes have specific bylaw requirements, especially when you have a board of directors or you have officers who are dealing with decision-making abilities, and as well as what type of memberships you want. If it's a medical, health kind of membership, then you want to be able to have lots of nurses or lots of individuals with experience and knowledge. So you might be limiting the membership to a specific type of individuals who have a specific type of experience. So consider all of these aspects before creating the bylaw. Bylaws should be implemented as a regulatory process within the organization. However, always consult a lawyer or make sure that you've actually got someone with legal contractual experience to be able to implement them, because once they're implemented, it may be hard to change them if you haven't provided the appropriate aspects to amend the bylaws, because these bylaws become a part of the corporate regulations and regulatory process, which means that it's like if I'm with the Law Society of Ontario, I am licensed with the Law Society of Ontario, and they have bylaws that I am required to follow. These bylaws are strict and require particular review every time I'm dealing with situations. So these are all things to be considered when you're preparing your bylaws. So make sure you're reviewing them and actually consulting a lawyer when you're finalizing your bylaws, so it actually is implemented appropriately for your organization to function properly and to be able to resolve conflicts, as well as know what the structure of this organization is. So common bylaw mistakes: copying bylaws without legal review. This is important because a lot of people implement legal concepts, but they don't understand what the legal concept means. So before you actually implement anything into a bylaw that you are not 100% sure of, always speak to a lawyer. Always consult with a legal professional. This is important because your bylaws actually structure your organization for, it could be for decades, depending on how long the organization lasts. The bylaws also, people forget that there are conflicts that might occur, conflicts with articles or legislation. These also will become ineffective. The bylaws will become ineffective if they conflict with your purposes in your articles of incorporation, as well as if they conflict with the legislative process. Depending on case law, you may have to review your bylaw and the legislation and case law to determine if it's appropriate. So this is where you need legal advice. So consult with a lawyer to be able to establish a proper structure for your bylaws. Not establishing appropriate roles. So if you don't have the appropriate roles, like if you don't have the checks and balances, if there isn't a president but no vice president, you have no financial director, you have no financial committee, you have specific areas of roles of officers that you're missing, like a treasurer or a event or coordinator or a committee, you may have to you might have to amend the bylaws again. So make sure that you're actually doing it appropriately, because your members that are a part of your organization have a right to understand what the bylaws are and be able to implement the bylaws accordingly to allow for the roles to exist, and the type of decision-making powers that exist within those roles may not be established properly. So there might be a conflict between the vice president and the president's role, or the treasurer and the accountant's role. So these are things to consider when you're creating a bylaw. You might be missing a quorum. So how do you vote people in? How do you elect people? These are all things that need to be considered before you actually implement the bylaw, because that will establish how your organization structure is created and who has the right to vote. These are important, because how would you create, it'll be a massive mess of people trying to figure out what to do if there's like 50 people and no actual roles. So who's going to make that decision at that point? These are all things to consider. So amending bylaws, what you need to know: follow existing rules for amendment. So you're always incorporating an amendment process within your bylaws, which will allow you to understand how to amend the bylaw in the future. Because once the membership grows, you can't just the director or the president can't just say, oh, I'm just going to amend the bylaws. That's not the process, and it requires that there should be a quorum in order to do amendments, because then members have the right to know what type of amendments are occurring into the bylaws and who is permitted to bring an amendment into existence, and what type and how it should be incorporated. So these are all things that need to be considered when you're creating the bylaw. Think about the structure itself. I want to be able to implement a bylaw. So a member who has been a member for years can bring in a required amendment. And then the directors will say, okay, we're creating a meeting to create a voting system, and this is what is on our agenda today. The members, the director will bring in the specific type of amendment and indicate what it is and how it will assist, or it will create a structure within the bylaws and the organization. And then the members are permitted to vote on that to determine if it should pass. This is how an amendment process is created. So think about those aspects, because they're important. You need an approval process from all the members, not just the board of directors, because it is the members who are involved in the organization. The board of directors are solely there to make sure that the organization is functioning appropriately and that the organization is adhering to the required purposes, as well as any kind of functional issues that may occur. This is the important part about having bylaws. It allows you to know what the structure is and how to create a long-term goal. Review bylaws annually for relevance. So make sure that the bylaws have not actually gone into a legal stance where it's void and no longer permitted. Especially if the legislation has changed, then the bylaws also have to be amended and implemented according to the legislation. If specific aspects of the bylaws, like certain clauses, don't actually are no longer actually appropriate to be included in the bylaw. So at this point, you would say, hey, this clause doesn't actually adhere to the legislative requirement. We need to amend it. So this is the process to amend. We have to amend it accordingly. And that is how it works. So in summary, not-for-profit organizations serve a public or community benefit, not private profit. So no revenues, no no investments, only fundraising, charity, donation. These are aspects that are permitted in not-for-profit organization. Membership fees are allowed because as per the bylaws, you can put membership fees into the bylaws so that in long term you're able to pay in to become a member, and it's restrictive so that only specific individuals are permitted to become members in this organization. Bylaws act as your non-profit internal rule book. Don't overlook them. They're important. They're actually what creates the clear governance, membership, roles, and decision-making processes that are essential for the organization to continue operating. Keep your bylaws practical, compliant, and regularly reviewed. So make sure that you're not forgetting to deal with these, but also remember, as a not-for-profit, you're also required to be filing regulatory requirements as a corporation with the business registry. So you may have to be doing a yearly review of your organization and filing required materials or initial returns as well, and other updates as the organization changes, including, let's say, directors have been changed and they are you're no longer a director. You were once a director, now you're no longer a director. At this point, you will have to amend your articles or with the business registry to indicate that the directors have changed. So remember that, as well as updating bylaws, because it's important and essential for the organization to continue. You should also be keeping a minute book for for not-for-profit organizations as well. This just means that all of the essential documents that are important for the organization should be kept into a specific binder where it's easily accessible by the board of directors and has been implemented with articles of incorporation, any documents incorporating the not-for-profit organization, including the bylaws, any insurance policies taken for the directors, and any other implemented information that needs to be accessible by the directors. Also, financial statements are important as well in case CRA decides to do an audit on your organization. So consider these aspects. Seek legal review before finalizing and amending bylaws. But this is not only bylaws. Make sure that you seek legal review in case you are implementing any contracts into the not-for-profit organization with other individuals who are providing services for the not-for-profit organization, as well as the articles of incorporations are being amended and updated as per the requirement on an annual basis when electoral process is completed. You might, when individuals change, if the board of directors changes, you might need to amend this, as well as officers who are being elected into the officer role. These are all things that need to be made sure to be updated in the business registry. So do not forget those aspects. Also, on a continuous basis, people forget this. If you do not respond to the business registry's emails indicating, oh, are there any changes? Are there anything? And no response is provided, they may assume that this organization no longer exists and dissolve your organization. So make sure that you respond to the business registry's emails or update requests as per regulation. Finally, I thank you all for attending today's webinar, and I hope this was very informative and helped you understand the not-for-profit organizations process, as well as how bylaws actually assist organizations in long-term goals. If you have any questions regarding implementing a not-for-profit organization or bylaws or any contracts, you can always reach out to me by email and we can book an appointment to discuss them further. Please do not hesitate. It is important. People always believe that it's not necessary to get legal advice, but when it gets too late and you have a litigious process where you have to go to court because someone is suing you because you did not implement specific guidelines or financial management, or you did not provide a proper structure, then it may be very late in the process and you may end up incurring a lot more costs than anticipated. So consider all of these aspects and make sure to contact a legal representative to assist you in this and any other further advice. Either way, thank you so much for attending. It was such a pleasure providing this information to individuals. And if you have any questions, please contact me. My information is below.